The Spin-off Podcast Network.
As a sports fan, I have to confess. Sometimes the game gets kind of boring. That's when I unfold my Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 7 and use multi-window viewing on its large screen. Boring game? I'm checking out my fantasy baseball league at the same time. Score still 1-0? I'm replying to emails in the other window, scoring points with the boss. Semifinals finally getting exciting? I'm buying tickets to the finals and booking my flights. Can your phone do that?
The new Galaxy Z Fold 7. Get yours at Samsung.com.
Mint is still $15 a month for premium wireless. And if you haven't made the switch yet, here are 15 reasons why you should. 1, it's $15 a month. 2, seriously, it's $15 a month. 3, no big contracts. 4, I use it. 5, my mom uses it. Are you playing me off? That's what's happening, right? Okay, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, $15 per month equivalent required. New customer offer first 3 months only. Then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
Here he is, the Prince of Porniki. Te kingi o te whanganui a tara.
Like the Night King with an ice javelin surrounded by a perpetual winter, howling Arctic gales.
That's good stuff.
Yeah, done. One more shot.
I say, is that from Game of Thrones? Tēnā koutou katoa. I'm Toby Manhire. This is Gone by Lunchtime. Annabelle Mather, kia ora, how are you?
Very well, thank you.
Ben Thomas in Wellington, how are you?
Yeah, good. It's a good day in Wellington today, which is to say there's a blue sky out there, which is freezing cold if you step out into it.
T.I. here is making magic happen. How are you, T.I. here?
Very well, thank you. Good boy.
That's nice. Let's discuss the issues. What are we gonna do today? We'll talk a bit about economy, and the energy sector review, which has just landed in our inboxes
Moments ago.
So we haven't had a chance to pour through all the spreadsheets yet. I know that will disappoint some of our listeners. Annabelle is, as we speak, going through the details. She loves the appendices. But let's start on the Palestine statehood decision. The past master of big reveals, Winston Peters. We remember, of course, in 96 and 2017, leave the announcement till the last line of the speech, that sort of thing. There's a little bit of that playbook coming out when he held us all waiting for many weeks, really. And the decision agreed by the New Zealand government was to announce its position on recognition or otherwise of Palestinian statehood in the United Nations General Assembly, with all of the scenery and pageantry and perhaps gravitas that affords. And the speech, which was delivered on Saturday morning New Zealand time, towards the end of it, Winston Peters said that it was a gesture, essentially, that New Zealand would not be adopting at this time. He did, I think it's important to note, given that many people have grasped parts of the speech and the announcement that suit their own ends. There is a line in the speech that he condemned Hamas. He also said, New Zealanders are shocked by the harrowing images of famine in Gaza, revolted by the grossly disproportionate military action from the Israeli government, and disturbed by Israeli rhetoric and actions aimed at dismantling future prospects for a Palestinian state. So he was hardly saying everything's fine, we're not going to get involved, but he stopped short of the announcement. Among other notes of significance in that, of course, is that a host of allies, including in the Anglosphere, Australia, Canada, the UK, a bunch of other countries, 157 countries at the UN now have recognised Palestinian statehood. So there is a sense that we are, by one account, you could say, rowing in a different direction to many of our allies. You could say it's an assertion of the independent foreign policy that is so cherished. Annabelle, were you surprised? What did you make of it? I guess the two camps on this are one that the statehood question is a performative exercise. I think that was Marco Rubio's words. Be welcomed by Hamas, some claimed. Helen Clark said it was a day of shame for New Zealand. There are Colin Keating, former senior New Zealand diplomat on Q&A on the weekend, I think articulated quite cogently the case for doing it, and that just even though it might not meet certain criteria of statehood as understood in years gone by, this is an evolving concept and it nudges the dial. That how do you articulate a position and nudge the dial? What's your response to the development?
Like many New Zealanders, I was deeply disappointed by the decision not to recognise a Palestinian state, and I think, like many other New Zealanders, disappointed that it felt like we'd almost had the wool pulled over our eyes a bit in terms of the approach taken. I think that most people felt that that there was going to be some sort of recognition, and it was sort of hammering out the details between the positions of our various coalition partners and what that might look like, what the conditions of that recognition might be.
Yeah.
So I think that a lot of New Zealanders felt that once the information came out and we saw that it was an MFAT that prepared the paper for Peters, that it was his office, and that it was quite clear from that they wouldn't be supporting recognition, that New Zealanders felt like they had been somewhat misled. That might be too strong a word, or that perhaps he hadn't been upfront earlier with what the announcement was going to be, because he didn't want the backlash at home to overpower what he was going to say at the General Assembly. I think in terms of the justifications for not supporting the recognition of a Palestinian state, things like it would merely be a gesture. I think it's fair to say that most things that New Zealand does at the UN is generally a gesture. We are a very small country, but But this type of leadership and symbolism, especially during such a catastrophic human crisis, is very important. There wasn't a lot explained by Mr. Peters in terms of what needed to be done by Palestine that would shift that position. And I think in terms of the I do think that in terms of the criticism that, New Zealand is not in line with the position of our traditional allies, I don't think that matters too much. Our foreign policy should be independent. But in any case, we should have supported the recognition of a Palestinian state, because it's the right thing to do.
Ben, what do you make out of it? I mean, Annabelle makes the point symbolism. Well, I mean, I think I saw the French foreign minister saying somewhere that, a great large amount of politics is symbolism. Symbolism is not necessarily vacuous, although it can be. I mean, there is, I guess, the danger in something like this of what, is sometimes called the politician syllogism, which is, this is appalling, something must be done, this is something, therefore let's do it. On the other hand, if you look at what's kind of overtaken a lot of this insofar as this 20-point plan, which Netanyahu has gone along with, and it's hard to tell whether he is doing it grudgingly or not. He's certainly been clearly obliged by the Americans to apologize to Qatar, where they had that extra-national attack recently,
where they attempted to assassinate the ceasefire negotiation team.
And there is back at home that Smotrich, has compared Netanyahu to Chamberlain for going along with this plan. We wait and see what will play out there, but You know, the French are very clear that the announcement of statehood was a step rather than a gesture, a step towards the next thing. Maybe this stuff really does matter.
Look, I think Annabelle's right in terms of New Zealand making any kind of statement. I can't imagine that we would have been planning to establish diplomatic relationships with the Palestinian state, which, I think, as Peters correctly observed, isn't really in much of a position to sort of assume most of the kind of responsibilities of statehood right now. I think in a material sense, you can see Peter's argument, or I guess the New Zealand government's argument. It was, I think, it's a symbolic action. On the other hand, there is sort of the question of, if you're showing opprobrium or you're trying to condemn Israel's actions, what is the next step up from saying Netanyahu's lost the plot? What is something that, Israel is actually sensitive to, because it is not criticism from prime ministers, then you probably are left with the recognition of statehood. And I think it's not totally clear what the kind of triggers were, whether it was New Zealand first and acts, fairly well pronounced support for Israel, and whether that was the big impediment, whether it was fears about the United States and our relative position with them. And of course, we do want to maintain our good relationship with the states, just so, because otherwise what would happen? They might, impose insane tariffs on foreign-made movies or lumber coming from New Zealand or something like that. We really, we really want to keep on their good side, because to enjoy all the fruits that is born. So look, you can understand the argument in the most sort of, I guess, literal sense. I certainly thought that our recognition, or recognition from us, would follow our traditional partners, and I think it does sort of leave us a little out of step with countries that we would regard as peers. And I guess there's not really too much more to say about that. Yeah. Aside from the fact that through this whole thing, this thing that keeps getting brought up, that, New Zealand is sort of has a moral leader that punches above its weight. People bring up, for instance, the Springbok tour, but they don't bring up the Olympics, 6 years earlier, that 20 African nations boycotted because we weren't excluded while we were touring apartheid South Africa for rugby.
They do. I've seen people bring that up. I mean, but that supports the argument, doesn't it? That these things can make a difference. Or that is to say, had we not toured South Africa at that time, then that boycott wouldn't have happened.
No, for sure. I just think that the argument that we're some sort of moral leader, or that, we sort of punch above our weight in showing the path forward for the rest of the world, has always been grossly overstated. And I think add another one to the list.
It's a good narrative to aspire to, though, right? The other thing that Peters said that I thought was unusual was when he talked about how he was worried that recognizing a Palestinian state might trigger Israel, might trigger Netanyahu. I felt like that was a little bit psychotherapist vibes.
There was the metaphor about the string being too tight, or too loose, you can't play music. Too tight, I think it's a Buddhist aphorism, and too tight and it will snap, and Israel's going to snap, which is a curious, I suppose, philosophy and geopolitics. The other point that you touch on regarding the mechanics of the decision-making and all of that, when you survey the field of the announcements, certainly it's fair to say the announcements that, broadly speaking, were in the acknowledgement of a Palestinian state, the people making those announcements are the heads of government. So Macron, Starmer, Albanese, Carney. Is it unusual, or is it not important that the individual making this statement on the world stage was not the Prime Minister?
I think it's probably an accurate reflection of who holds the power in our country. I mean, it is unusual, but I'm not sure that even if Luxon had wanted to go, if Peters would have allowed him.
Ben?
Yeah, well, that's right. Winston Peters has very zealously guarded that kind of the foreign minister status, although it is the prime minister who has the ultimate say on foreign policy.
He has a depth of experience, that's true. And I thought actually Luxon equipped himself reasonably well and did give a press conference within a few hours of the announcement in New York, so wasn't exactly going into hiding on it. Nevertheless.
Yeah, I thought his best line in that was where he said, "Look, none of this is great."
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, okay, great, yep, good. Like, true.
Yeah.
Coming back to, can I just say one thing on Luxon Bangers? He spoke with Audrey Young the other day. Quite a
published this morning in the Herald.
Yeah,
interview,
and I just wanted to share one of his quotes, which I thought was amazing.
Please do.
He was being asked about his leadership and performance, and he said, "Well, for me, I'm always dissatisfied with the performance of myself and everyone in general. You know, I'm just wired to be constantly constructively dissatisfied while being incredibly optimistic." And I thought, man, that's some words to live by, eh?
It's quite an interesting interview. There was a lot of "I get it." One of his things is "I get it, I get that, I get it." He wants to make clear he gets it. Also, the Scott Robertson stuff, which I thought was interesting. He was like, "Yeah, I was talking to Scott Robertson on Saturday night, clearly at the rugby. I get it. We get it. Me and Scott, we both get it."
Him and Scott.
Razor,
Tight.
the razor of like it's a big risk. Like now saying
Really?
me and there's quite a big game in Perth on Saturday night. I mean, I wouldn't say he was Scott Robinson is the most secure person in a leadership role in New Zealand.
It is instructive about kind of the little things. If he could just, instead of saying "I get it," say "I understand what New Zealanders are going through."
Yes.
Right, which is which is a John Key and Jacinda Ardern thing, and I think is what he means.
Yes,
but
that's what he's trying to say.
Says, "I get it."
Yeah,
and it sounds like he's like yeah. But
these are the details that maybe some of us are overly attuned to, but where you say that he said at that press conference, like none of this is good. There's something about that is what a real person says. That was not on a talking point, I don't think. When he said of Bibi Netanyahu that he's lost the plot, that was not on a talking point. That was not on the notes that have been supplied to him. And that's where you kind of go, well, maybe just tear up the notes, mate. And John Key had that quality of saying to people, look, and then speaking in the way that, someone you knew personally might. When
Who
you bump
else?
into them down the shops.
Another person who has that quality who I met with recently is Mark Mitchell. Mark Mitchell is a really plain-spoken guy who has such a pragmatic communication style where where he is able to listen, to respond with authenticity, in a way that really resonates. So I've been very, very impressed with his communication style. But can I just read one of my other favourite quotes from Luxon? This is about reshuffles and whether or not there's going to be a reshuffle. I'll just reshuffle when I feel like it and when I think it's needed. And because I'm having more dynamic performance conversations with my ministers, which may be a different way of how it's been done in the past, but I'm just very straight up about it. I liked that one.
I'll tell you
I
one
love
other
dynamic
thing
performance
in terms
conversations.
of people who know how to talk in an ordinary, relatable way. Stuart Nash.
For 16-year-old boys.
Anyway, look, the good thing is Tony Blair's on the case, so that's all fine.
When your investors, customers, and workers demand more from your business, make it happen with SAP. The AI-powered capabilities of SAP can help you streamline costs, connect with new suppliers, and manage payroll, even when your business is being pulled in different directions. To deliver a quality product at a fair price while paying your people what they're worth too, so your business can stay unfazed. Learn more at sap.com/uncertainty.
Anyone can follow. It takes something special to be an original, which is why the 2025 Lincoln Navigator SUV arrives with new ways of surrounding you in luxury, including the ultra-wide 48-inch panoramic display and the multi-sensory Lincoln Rejuvenate experience. A true original never stops evolving. So meet the 2025 Navigator, the original that's all new and better than ever. Learn more at Lincoln.com. Lincoln and Navigator are trademarks of Ford or its affiliates.
We touched briefly in the last podcast on the GDP numbers, the quarter to June, where there was a 0.9% contraction, higher than pretty much any prediction. And then I suppose, as we were speaking, so too were the Statler and Waldorf of fiscal discipline in New Zealand, Roger Douglas and Ruth Richardson, both out there saying of Nicola Willis, I think, did Roger Douglas say she should resign? Which was... But it's a point that Roger Douglas has been making for a while, which is not really to do with the particularities of a particular quarter or a particular term even, but the long-term direction of travel. So whatever. Ruth Richardson, who, of course, inherited a situation in 1990 where she went considerably harder and more austerity approach than Nicola Willis has. And then Nicola Willis, as if that wasn't tough enough, then she had to rock up to the mood of the Boardroom, the New Zealand Herald's annual get-together of the hardworking, ordinary chief executives and other
multi-millionaire CEOs. Yeah.
Kiwis, good Kiwis. And they deliver their report card every year, and it wasn't good. Nicola Willis was
13, I think.
13th, 3.09 on the list, but above Christopher Luxon, who needs a bit more dynamic. What was it? Dynamic.
Dynamic performance conversations.
Dynamic performance conversations. We had a dynamic performance conversation with the mood of the Boardroom, who gave him 2.96 out of 5, ranked him 15th.
Seymour was 11. Not in the top 10.
Right, the Minister of Regulation, Deputy Prime Minister. Winston Peters second, Erica Stanford right at the top, which is interesting. Chris Bishop, a creditable third. Anyway.
If I could just quickly share some insights on that,
please.
and why those ministers are ahead of Luxon. I think he can still claim credit because he says, I partner with all my ministers on all of their agendas. I'm the leader of a team, and so my job is to comfort my ministers when they're being challenged and to also afflict them when they need to be stepping up their performances as well. And I think the
So you're saying he collectivizes the good marks, and
he's driving them with his afflictions and his comfort.
Interesting.
To a higher performance.
Interesting.
Proof's in the pudding.
Proof's in the big rocks, I always say. It's not. Nicola Willis was on the radio the other day saying that she took a battering, which was, and also, by the way, Christopher Luxon let his finance minister deal with the fallout from that number for a full 24 hours before he turned up, and then effusively backed her as the greatest finance minister the world has ever seen. But the Boardroom, beg your pardon?
And will ever see.
And will ever see. Right.
New Zealand will never have a big claim about both the past and the future.
Yeah. Well,
New Zealand politics.
She's a thoroughly nice person, though, isn't she?
Dynamic. Nicola Willis.
Yes.
Sure. Yeah, I think she seems like a very nice person.
Yeah, she's a nice lady with a pretty tough gig.
The Boardroom setting is meant to be a home crowd, right? It's like for Winston Peters rocking up to a Grey Power meeting or the Greens logging onto Blue Sky. Ben, how tough is that as to get that response from the crowd?
The mood of the boardroom is not really a kind of congratulatory exercise, in the sense that, you do get, what is it? I think it's between about 100 and 200, I think maybe 125 this year, executives. And of course, there is they'll get the chance to sort of rate anonymously. So it is a bit of a steam blowing off exercise, I think, for business. And I think finance ministers do tend to have a pretty tough time there. I remember the one of them that I've been to the breakfast of, I think, was Stephen Joyce and Grant Robertson in the 2017 year. And Joyce was really under the pump, and I think he had delivered the first surplus, for almost 10 years, I think, that year in his budget, and but still came in for a lot of criticism. Business often has, I find that those sort of surveys often have sometimes very reasonable sort of criticisms. One that came through, for instance, was the energy criticisms in this year's budget. They talk about a lack of a plan, but in a lot of cases it is that sort of standard refrain of lower taxes and cutting spending. You want lower taxes and cutting spending, but you also want more spent on research and development, and it can be sort of unreasonable to sort of patch together all of these criticisms from different people coming from different sectors into one kind of, picture of complaint, I suppose. It certainly was a tough crowd. It certainly wasn't good timing coming hot on the heels of those GDP figures, which, a few economists have said, will be revised. But look, it is getting increasingly tough for the government. I think part of the issue with Christopher Luxon's inbuilt optimism that operates in twain with his constructive self-dissatisfaction or whatever, is that he's, at each point during, this year and last year, he's been saying, we're already seeing the green shoots, we're already seeing the recovery. I think even about 2 weeks ago, he said, actually it might have even been after the GDP figures came out, he said the recovery is underway now. And it's like, well, okay, sure, the recovery is underway now, but we have to grow at 1% this quarter just to get back to where we were, right? So it's and I think that over time, because he and Willis have been the front for the front people for the economy, over time, I think that sort of optimism and talking up has sort of eroded and chipped away at their credibility as messengers on it.
Yeah.
And so now when they say the recovery is underway, well, maybe true, certainly seems like better indicators, so far in the present or for the quarter that we've just finished. But at the same time, that's not going to sort of get people opening their wallets and rushing out because, Christopher Luxon has reassured us that the green shoots are there, because over the last, 6 quarters in government, it's been just as likely that those green shoots are sort of weeds that are kind of cracking through your sewage and spilling shit into your yard, So
they're parsley, not Cody.
I mean, tough one though, isn't it? Because of course you want to get a mood of optimism coming from on top. There is a lot of it really is because it's trying to wait it out until interest rates are cut, and therefore people get a bit more confidence in the economy and spend money. So that's the trouble, isn't it? That they thought that worm was going to turn more quickly than it has. Indeed, some of the forecasting from Treasury suggested it would. And now the difficulty is, do you hold the line or not? I mean, I tell you one thing about the Reserve Bank, which has escaped the analysis of some of the lesser economic observers, is that Anna Bremen, who's been appointed the governor of the Reserve Bank, having been deputy governor of the Riksbank in Sweden, begins on December 1. 3 days later, what happens?
Your monetary policy statement?
No. IKEA opens in Sylvia Park.
Oh.
So the future of the New Zealand economy
Yeah.
is in the hands of Sweden now. And I feel confident about that. Like, I think that the Sylvia Park, that's going to make people feel better.
We're going to be a lot more stylish.
Anna Bremen.
Yeah.
She's quite, she's a good media performer.
I did think it was interesting that when she was asked about what might be, when Willis was asked about what might be different if they didn't have a coalition partner, I can't quite remember the phrasing of the question, but she said that there probably would have been a lot less focus on Māori issues. Yes. And you can kind of, I wondered if that was also reflected in the results of the minister's performance. You have Brooke Van Velden, who was rated a lot higher rated higher than Seymour, and has been very busy in her role. Seymour not in the top 10, which I imagine he'd be quite disappointed with, and perhaps it's a reflection of the fact that so much of his focus has been on, treaty issues and identity politics rather than the economy.
Worth mentioning just in passing too, a couple of reforms that are, developing pieces of work, and I think broadly will be scrutinised and finessed and so on. One from Brooke Van Velden, ranked 8th on the holiday pay mechanisms, which probably need some more discussion, and we'll get that, but needed to be addressed. And then Chris Penk, who's Minister outside Cabinet, who led the earthquake building rules review. Again, don't grab a huge number of headlines, but these are both kind of ministerial work programs that need to be done. The last thing, I guess, to say on the economic front, which I just think is worth noting in past, and Christopher Luxon and others have noted this two-track recovery thing, is, well, it's tempting to say that it's Wellington and Auckland where you see people having a difficult time, and the rest of the country things are looking up with those green shoots. It is a more complicated picture than that. I think if you look at Tokoroa or the Nelson Tasman region, which keeps getting walloped with shutdowns, it is a more complicated picture than that two-track recovery. Would you be advising, Ben, the two-track recovery line out of government?
That's a really puzzling one, because Luxon's really adopted it with gusto. He keeps talking about, we've got a two-track recovery, or two-track economy happening, or a two-track recovery. I don't know why you would talk like that, because the areas where it is going well, which is predominantly sort of the rural regional areas of the South Island, they know that it's happening. They're already feeling good. They're feeling increased spending, and for the people outside there, particularly Auckland, which is a very large voter base, and things are still, really struggling there. I think the highest unemployment rate in the country right now in Auckland, or highest youth unemployment, maybe. No, highest unemployment? We can fix it in post. Get AI to fix it. Put this whole thing into Notebook LLM and get it to redo it without the ums and the ahs, and just with witty banter between two hosts. I'm not sure what's intended when he talks about that. I don't know if what he's sort of saying is, look, help is on the way. It's just coming a bit more slowly, but look, we've taken care of part of it. I'm not sure. To me, it just seems sort of a little bit, potentially aggravating. Plus, it's a sort of slightly weird, unwieldy phrase. And as you said, also it's not particularly accurate. It's not as if all the regions are flourishing. Regions with a lot of dairy are flourishing.
Yeah.
And areas that rely on industrial activity are doing not so well because of, a number of things, but in particular energy. And Yeah, and I'm not sure, it's not an elegant enough phrase that I would have thought, you'd really want to reinforce that. I mean, I think two-track recovery is sort of seen as almost a pejorative of kind of,
Yeah.
well, there are a lot of people missing.
Presumably the thinking is it's better than a zero-track recovery. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like saying, like, oh, don't worry, we've got a bit of a two-track education system right now, but don't worry, rich white people are doing fine. So I really struggle to understand why he's using that line. There's a lot that I don't really understand. They are definitely trying to sort of cohere their comms around the economy now. Just over the last month or so, you've had press releases about a new storage facility for Te Papa, the new Dunedin hospital, and the number of jobs that will be created in the next few months is in the second or third paragraph. And that's quite a new sort of kind of facet, I guess, of these sorts of announcements. It's really being focused on, look, there are jobs going to be created soon, and it's really kind of the messaging from the government across the portfolios is really focused on tangible things that are happening for the economy. So there's obviously a real sense of urgency there in terms of trying to shift up the narrative, but I think that's part of what's been causing issues for them, is that maybe it would have been better to do as John Key did, back with the GFC, and say, look, this is going to take a while. We've got to knuckle down. We've got to, we've all just got to pull together until things look up. And I know electorates are becoming more impatient. Maybe that doesn't work anymore, but I think sort of always promising that the next quarter is going to be where the good things are happening hasn't worked out for them.
Okay, before we go, let's touch briefly on the energy sector review, which emerged this morning. I should tell you that it's Wednesday, the 1st of October. Right at the end of the podcast is a good time to announce the date. It's the morning of the 1st of October. White rabbits, pinching a punch. And there were some expectations around the review around what may or may not happen. There were some who would like to have seen the gentailers, that's the companies, the big ones being Mercury, Genesis, Contact, Meridian, who both generate and retail electricity, see them split up into two entities, the supply and demand sides. There were some who wanted, including floated the idea in the report, that the government ownership should be sold. So at the moment they're that mixed ownership model whereby they're 51% owned by the state. And then there was the CTU, who came out yesterday arguing that in fact the state should buy back the bits that are owned privately and bring them back into full nationalised public hands. In the end, the report seems to have seems to have avoided any of those more substantial structural changes in favour of a more modest kind of tweak-based approach, calling for saying they're prepared to support capital funding requests. So there are a bunch of other parts to this that I have not looked at in any detail at this point, but that the top line, Annabelle, is that we will encourage the capital funding. You got ideas, bring them on to address these twin challenges, I guess, of one, energy security, and we've seen some midwinter shortages, some pretty close shave things over recent time, and then the other issue, which is that it's really, really, really expensive to pay for electricity, and it seems, I guess, a little bit underwhelming that it's kind of we'll help you if you want to raise some money for some cool ideas. We'll match it. Given that does seem like the sort of thing that could have been sent in an email rather than a big old review.
I think a lot of people will probably feel like it's supermarket duopoly Mark II, where the government sort of makes some pretty big statements about getting on top of the problem, and then basically you get something that could have been like bashed out on an email. A very strong focus on security, and less so on the cost of power for ordinary New Zealanders. We know that energy poverty is an increasing issue all around the country. Doesn't say a whole lot about that. So I think there'll be some real disappointment in that regard as well. I heard Nicola Willis this morning saying that, this is about the government putting their money where their mouth is, but I think a lot of New Zealanders will feel that they would also like their mana and ownership to be put where their mouth and their money is going also, and that renationalising such a strategic resource, when we've seen so many, important industries or mills and fall over recently, is a real problem. So I think I think you'd have to say it's a pretty underwhelming response to a big issue.
Is Ben gone? Have we lost Ben? See out here.
Ben's gone.
Ben Thomas has failed to pay his power bill, or there's been a blackout in Wellington, one or the other. But very, very opposite departure from Ben Thomas, and so I guess let's just flick the switch on this one, shall we?
The Spin-off Podcast Network.